So my project's called Hackodex. I'm pretty sure all of you know who I am, but so Hackodex is basically a project index, and it's a tool for developers and recruiters. And obviously, you might say, well, what's a project index? A project index, in this case, is essentially a search engine for data. And it's going to be focusing on data coming from open source projects. So it can, in the future, come from a variety of sources. Right now, it's coming strictly from GitHub, where it's obviously a lot of open source projects and already a lot of data associated with projects that can retrieve from that. On top of that, I'm adding additional data that a user, so either someone, an owner of a project, or a user who's potentially going to contribute to a project can add to a project. And then parse queries, so I can essentially sort through code for projects, figure out what libraries are being used, if they're favoring some kind of behavior, and then just essentially aggregate huge amounts of data that will allow me to match a developer to a project that fits their coding style, libraries they're familiar with, code they've worked on in the past. So there's a little more than that, though. So if you're a user, a developer, you have the ability to follow a set of attributes. So you can say, well, I want to program C++, and here's a list of libraries I know how to use. And I want to learn how to use this library, and I really like inline assembly. And then it could literally spit back all of the projects on GitHub that fit all those characteristics. So it's essentially an enhanced search engine with its own website and the ability to add additional data to what's already retrievable from the repository itself. And it can generate essentially a CV or a report card or a transcript or whatever based on your performance. So all the projects you've contributed to, what technologies you've used in those projects, basically taking what you get if you look at the statistics from GitHub, and instead of focusing on quantity of commits or frequency of commits, it's going to focus on what technologies you use, which ultimately is a much better indicator to a company whether or not you'd be a good fit for the kind of help. So it allows someone, a recruiter at a glance, to see whether you're familiar with the kind of technologies that you have to be using there without them having to sort through it. It's not exactly a replacement for Observatory, but it's kind of a similar project in that it is an index of open source projects. It doesn't do ranking, though, and it's focused on matching users to projects instead of encouraging users to work on projects. So it keeps track of matched user contributions. So if you are matched to a project, it'll then see how good of a match was it you actually contributed to that project, and if so, were you contributing in the manner that it expected you to. And it's a single global website instead of something that we deploy on like a college campus or a group. But it does have the ability to add location attributes. So if you want to work on open source projects that are based locally, either within a college or within a geographic area, you can add a tag for that. The real point of it, though, is to match people who have no idea what they want to work on with projects. So it finds projects that are similar to an idea and encourages collaboration by either finding things that are basically already what you wanted to do, so you can just contribute to an existing project instead of writing it all from scratch, or finding pieces of code that you can use in your project because they've already implemented large chunks of code. So it works with a Python backend. Initially, it's actually essentially functioning as a search engine and doesn't store tagged data locally. That's going to be coming later this summer. So it pulls project information from GitHub. Initially, it's basically you type in a search query and select whatever attributes you want to search by, and then it executes the API calls needed to retrieve that data. In the future, there's actually going to be a database with all of these attributes stored, so it doesn't have to keep calling the GitHub API. And that also allows us to add additional attributes that can be retrieved directly, because that's really the plan. And it allows you to import some profile information from GitHub and tracks all their projects, even ones that they weren't matched for through this Hackodex tool. And allows project owners to add additional information. So I'm going to be doing something different from what most people in RCOS do, and there's going to be a live beta every 3 weeks. So I'm focusing on adding very small features and getting it entirely production ready in a short period of time. So first beta, which hopefully will be out next week, is basic search functionality and attributes. This is just for doing the direct API calls. 3 weeks after that, there'll be a database and some additional attributes being stored in it, but the database will be populated on demand for all those API calls until essentially the entire database is full and it's just being taken. after that, user profiles, and then finally report generation. That'll pretty much be the summary. So that's what I have. Next to the usual suspects. I look for your feedback since this is something that ultimately will be benefiting groups like RCOS directly. Okay.
Do you think it's possible this could go in the direction of some sort of I don't know, kind of how there's like online program learning websites, like where you just go online and you want to write code for 5 minutes so it kind of let you know and gives you a little snippet to work on?
It could.
More of an in-depth, like, I want to do something for summer, let me look around and get up and see what I can work on.
It's a little more of the latter, just because if you're going to be contributing to a project, your code needs to work. Other people need to verify it works. If you're writing code for 5 minutes, the overhead needed for someone else to verify that that code is actually beneficial to the project will significantly outweigh them just writing the code themselves.
Okay.
So it's really just to help match people to a project that they'll not work on for a longer period of time. But it's to help people find projects that already exist instead of them starting working on a project from scratch when they might already be really good platform.
Can you run this concept of GitHub whether anybody else has attempted to do this?
In theory, actually, when I just discovered this morning, I bought the Hackodex domain a while ago. I got it out of an auction because I thought it was something cool domain. It turns out Hackodex was actually a project index like 4 years ago. Never got anywhere. It was closed source. I have no idea what it did. From what I could find out of their Twitter, it was kind of similar, but focused more on, instead of matching people to open source projects, just being an index sort of like observatory for closed.
There was a search engine called code.google.com or something. You can do a code search.
Yeah.
So what does that do? How does it come to?
Well, the code search works with just the code hosted with Google. Ultimately, what this is doing is not being a search of code, but being a search based on a lot of rich attributes. So some of those attributes aren't even directly coming from code. Instead, it's size based on various, parsing through the code, aggregating what libraries, all that kind of stuff. But it's really just a simple, nice interface for retrieving this kind of match. You could probably do, at least for the first half of the summer's work, you could get the same results by typing